Something that I learned very early on in life is stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. There's a lot that we can say about anxiety and depression, and like I said, I don't have the answers. Like I said, my wife is the brains of the operation in terms of our marriage, so I might not have the brain for all of those long names of prescriptions and all of the best practices out there. But what I do know is not necessarily a method, but it's a man, and his name is Jesus. And I just want to offer you something here in church that the world can't offer you, because this is why the church exists. Like, this is not a doctor's office. You came to church today. And if you're in a position where you're like, man, I've run out of options, I've run out of ideas, I've run out, I'm at the end of what I can handle, I have good news. That's the best place to find God, is at the end of yourself. I heard someone tell me it this way: the end of yourself is the beginning of God. And the reason that we say that is because if you could do it on your own strength, you wouldn't need him. But the journey that God has called all of you in, as a matter of fact, the purpose that he's placed on the inside of you requires something more than your natural strength. It requires his supernatural spirit. And that's why you've come here today. Not just to survive in life, because sure, medication can help you out, and sure, therapy can help you out, and you can go to counseling, that's amazing, and you can survive this life, but God didn't call Christians to survive this life. People are trying to survive in life, but to the Christian, God says, I want you to thrive, I want you to multiply. I don't just want you to feel all right. I want you to have joy that surpasses your situations. That means that even during 2020, the crazy people of 2020 were the people that were able to smile while the year was going on. Those were the people that, you're like, did you watch the news? Right? Like, those people, do you ever have that friend that's just a little bit too happy that they become annoying? That I know they're extreme happy, and then they got the high-pitched voice, and you're like, okay, let's calm it down. It's 8 a.m. I used to get to school early for breakfast in the lunchroom, and there was always that morning person. There's one. I don't know how morning people exist. I'm not. I am because I have to, because I have 2 little kids, and they're going to wake me up. And but I don't know the people that they were 15 and they would wake up at 6 and be happy about it. I had those people in high school. And I think about, Christians are like that group of people. They're that group of people where they're happy when it doesn't make sense, because their happiness is not found on what they sense, meaning the pressures of whatever cultural climate is happening right now, where everyone should be mad, they should be upset, they should be anxious because we don't know what's going on. They should be depressed because it feels like everything's on the decline. But for the Christian, their happiness is not grounded on what they experience. Their happiness is founded on Jesus, who never changes. And if he's victorious, that means that every time I wake up, if I find my foundation on him, I'm victorious. Like, my house could be messed up, but I'm victorious. Like, I might be sick today, but I'm victorious. Like, I might not have as much money as I might even need to get through the week, but I'm going to believe in a God that already has the victory and provision is for me, because when I wake up, I'm victorious. That's why you're called a Christian. The definition of a Christian is literally a little Christ. My identity is no longer mine. It's not my name. I identify with Christ now. I am his reflection. I'm his reflection on earth. And I believe that it's about that time in history where the church reflects something that the world can't have. And it's a peace that surpasses understanding. Can I get a table really quick? I'm gonna jump into the word. Before I do that, I'm gonna tell you a little story. Me and my wife, our whole family. So we're a family of 4. I got a 2-year-old little daughter and 7-month-year-old son. So sleep is a distant memory. We don't remember what sleep is like. It's fine. We're making it. We'll be all right. But I remember one day it was a Saturday, and we were on our way to the zoo. We're going to the zoo. We're going to take the kids to the zoo. My daughter loves the animals. She's learned the name of the animals. So we're like, all right, maybe get my number 1 dad hat on. take her to the zoo, see the elephants and the bears and the whole nine, right? So we go, and all of the Florida iguanas. Every exhibit had an iguana in there, and I'm like, that's not on purpose. But we went to the zoo, and on our way to the zoo, our worst fear that I didn't know that I should have this fear. It's the fear of a child throwing up in a car seat. So we were on the way to the zoo. We literally parked. We were 30 minutes from the house. We parked, and we got to the zoo, and she threw up. And I was like, oh man. And me and my wife were like, we paid for these tickets. Like, I don't know if we have a change of clothes back there or we're going to get some wipies. We're going to the zoo, all right? We got to make it up to her. She threw up. Like, let's go see some elephants. So we go and we're fine. And we went through the zoo day. We get back. Finally get back home. We get back home and all of a sudden, like, I'm in the kitchen. My wife's getting the kids, like, you know, they were sweating. We're changing the kids. I'm in the kitchen. We're about to make lunch. Then all of a sudden, I feel like this cold sweat hit me. Like, all of a sudden, like, I don't know if you've ever had this, like, you're like, I like freezed. Like, I was like, whoop. And then all of a sudden, my mouth got really watery. And I was like, I don't feel good right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to throw up. And I ran. And I threw up, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And my wife calls from the living room, babe, I need you to come get the kids. And I'm like, what's going on? So like, I finished, I run back, and I was like, what? She's like, I need to throw up. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I grab the kids, she runs out to throw up. She finished, she comes back out, and I was like, babe, you need to watch the kids now. I need to go. For about an hour. We looked at it was terrible at the time. It's hilarious now. It was terrible at the time. The world was falling up. Everybody was throwing up. So we're all throwing up, a family of 4. We're just trying to survive. It looked like a tag team match, WWE. We tagged in, tagged out. She would run, I would run. She would run, I would run. It was for about an hour and a half. And it felt like forever. I literally was repenting of sins that I did when I was like 12 years old. I was like, God, I promise. I'll take out the trash from my mom. I'm like, wait, I'm 29. Like, why did that come to my mind? Like, you ever have moments where you feel so sick, you repenting to God? You're like, if you get me through this, God, I promise I'll never do it again. We had God, if you get me through this moment, for about an hour and a half. And there was just no subsiding. So what we kind of deduced was like, we had food poisoning, but we didn't know, like, I guess, I don't know what this says about us. We ate a lot of places. It was only like 1 o'clock. I think we like ate out at 2 places. We'll blame it on the kids. The kids wanted to eat out. They're two in like 7 months. The kids wanted to eat out. And we ate at a place that gave us food poisoning. And if you know anything about being sick, especially being nauseous, time slows down to a crawl. It is horrible. It's like, it is, I don't know how to describe it, except it's like the Matrix. Like, you're dodging bullets, but you're just dodging throwing up in some place other than where you need to be throwing up, right? Like, everything's in slow motion. And I feel like, in a way, our minds are sick right now. Like, our minds are so just in this tension where there are historians and psychologists that say that from the year 2020 to now, about a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half, your body and my body have gone through the strain and the stress of what is equivalent to 10 normal years. Because it feels like, does anyone even remember 2019? If you do, you have great memory. I don't. I'm trying to think back. We're like, everything go back to normal. And I was like, what is normal? We went to the movies the other day and I felt like I was on another planet. I was like, man, I haven't smelled like movie theater popcorn in like forever. Felt like a long lost friend, a little distant memory. It's like, that's a year and a half ago. What is time? Time is awful, is what we found out. And so we get through 2020, we get now through 2021, and I'm thinking about the mindset. There's a term that they gave it. It's called pandemic brain. And we're all suffering with this pandemic brain because even if you remember 2019, the question is, are we ever going to get back there? And the opinions are wild on whether or not we are. And so we just get to this place where we're in this tension. And I believe that what we are suffering from right now is Perhaps if you're feeling medically like you're like, man, I've experienced anxiety and depression, you're probably in a place that either that's compounded, or if you've never experienced anything like depression or anxiety, perhaps you're experiencing it right now. This is what statistics say about the United States and the youth culture. It says that 60% of U.S. teens reported experiencing depression. 66% reported high anxiety, 75% reported feeling of loneliness, and 35% reported having had suicidal thoughts. Now, this is a wild set of statistics because these statistics are from 2019. Yeah, because you saw there, those are more than half. And then over a third of the population with suicidal thoughts in 2019. What they assume about what is happening right now is that there might possibly be the first time in human history where thoughts of suicide, anxiety, and depression have touched everybody now. Every single person. Almost without exception. And for those that have been able to make it through, have encountered addictions just to numb the confusion and the tension that has come with the stress of this season. And the question is, can we sustain what we're feeling right now? And my answer to you is this. If we're just trying to survive through life, all we will find ourselves is hyper-medicated and filling the void with trying to be more busy. But I'm here to tell you, you were born a spiritual being. There's a spirit on the inside of you that is longing for something more than this world can offer you. And yeah, you might be able to numb pain, but God doesn't want to numb your pain. He wants to heal your pain. He doesn't just want to distract your mind from all that is going wrong. He wants to bring peace to your mind. He doesn't want you to pretend like things are bad. He wants you to live in the reality of His goodness. And there's a difference. And I believe that that's what only God can do. I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to go to, if you can, go to 1 Kings. We're going to do 1 Kings chapter 19. In 1 Kings chapter 19, there's a legend in the Bible. He's a prophet. His name is Elijah. To preface, in chapter 18, Elijah literally going against hundreds of other prophets of another God. He calls them to the top of a mountain, and he says, you know what? Come to the top of this mountain, and whoever has the real God, their God will send down fire to consume the sacrifice. And so they set up their sacrifice. He sets up his. They're like day and night trying to pray to their God. Nothing happens. And literally Elijah prays, and in a short prayer, God sends down fire, proving to the nation of Israel that He is the true God. The whole nation turns and repents. They're in a famine. They're in a drought. All of a sudden, he prays for rain to come. They'd been in a drought for 3 years. All of a sudden, he prays. The rain starts to come. You know, like Elijah's the man. Like this dude is the man. He's calling down fire. He's calling down rain. And we pick up now in chapter 19, which I think it would shock you because it almost sounds like a different person. And that's often what it feels like when you're anxious or depressed. You feel like a different person. This is what it says in chapter 19, starting in verse 1. It says this. It says, when Ahab got home, this is the king that he had defeated his prophets, he told Jezebel the queen everything Elijah had done, including the way that he had killed all the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent the message to Elijah, may the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you, just as you killed them. And Elijah was afraid, and he fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under the solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. Man, I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. In verse 5, it says this, then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, get up and eat. First thing that I want you to know is that loneliness is real. Loneliness is real. And you know what? The thing about loneliness, especially in this account, is that in his loneliness, none of his accomplishments mattered. He called down fire. It's the most wild story. Read chapter 18. It is wild. He calls down a pillar of fire, comes, and then he prays. They were in a drought for 3 years. He prays, and all of a sudden it starts raining. And those moments weren't enough to save him from his mind. And in that, he finds himself lonely, isolated. There's no help. God, just end it all. I don't want to be here. But I want to tell you this. If you've ever had that feeling, if you're a Christian in this room and you have certain accomplishments and you've done good in school, I want to tell you that these thoughts happen. But just because you feel it doesn't make it true. Can I say that again? Just because you feel it doesn't make it true. That's why I love that song. Because if I can't feel it, you're still working. So even though I feel the absence of him working, doesn't mean he is not working. Also, even though I feel like my life is worthless and hopeless, just because you feel it that way doesn't mean that it is that way. And I believe that God is going to do something in our lives and in our hearts. And God is going to show us that it's not about how we feel in this moment. It has everything to do with his eternal nature that says, I've always been good. And even if you get the report, like Elijah got, that the queen was after him, God was still as powerful on the mountain when he called down fire. Even also when the queen sent out the death threat, God was still powerful. And for a moment, Elijah forgets that and he lets it go to the recesses of his mind and he starts to do the second thing. He starts to attack himself. Because not only is loneliness real, self-attack is real. How many have ever heard, you are your worst enemy? Nothing gets you like your own thoughts, right? Nothing, like no one's your biggest critic except you. You are. I am. You might be your worst enemy when it comes to stress in this life. And I believe that because we all deal with this, I want to use this as an example. Justin, can you come up here? I want to invite Justin to come up here because I believe that Justin has a very powerful story. And after Justin, after he testifies, then we're going to go into some worship and we're going to land it a little bit. But Justin, I want you to tell us a little bit about your journey because we're talking about self-attack, we're talking about loneliness, we're talking about things that people go through. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, your mental struggles, and a little bit of what you've been through?
Yeah, so when I was probably 13, 14, I was really struggling with depression, just always sad, always angry. When I was 15, that just kept continuing, really struggling with like self-harm, just not wanting to be here anymore. And it was amazing at the end of worship, you talking about that story with David and him singing and breaking self free of that spirit, because that's exactly what happened to me. When I was 15, I had a time of worship, and I encountered the presence of God in a way that just broke it instantly. And I just began to weep, and the only way I could describe it was like I was crying off my depression. And in an instant, I was free of everything I was experiencing until 2 years ago. This month, actually, I started to slowly feel the weight of depression again, which kept building and building, and ended up experiencing my first anxiety attack when I was at work. And anxiety attacks look different for everybody. For me, it's hyperventilating, shaking, my body turns cold. I kind of lose control of my arms start to shake. And I was so scared because I had never experienced anything like that. I didn't know what was happening, so I went to somebody in the church, and they ended up directing me towards a therapist that was so amazing and able to kind of walk me through how to process what I was feeling. But the start to that journey of learning to walk through it was being able to identify that, like, these things that I'm feeling are real, and it's okay. Like I was so scared to admit that like I was depressed, because I was like, no, if I'm the self-attack, I was like, if I'm depressed, I'm a bad person, so I can't feel that. And so I was just trying to like hide it from myself, that like these things aren't what I'm experiencing. But the moment I was able to identify that and admit, like, you know what, I am depressed, I am anxious, and that's okay. Like, God is still good, and he's going to walk me through this. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey the past 2 years, still walking through that, and the Lord's still healing me and guiding me through that.
And can you, and what I love about what you're encouraging is when you bring God into the equation and kind of picking up where almost like it left off, like there was this gap and you were good, and then it came back, and you're still pursuing God in the middle of the struggle. Can you give us a word of encouragement for those that are in the middle of this, and they're probably thinking, well, I've been in church for a while and I'm here today, but you're still struggling. How can someone deal with it in the middle of it?
I think the first thing is don't isolate. Like you talked about, how loneliness is so real. Like, isolation is the most dangerous thing you can do when you're in the middle of depression, when you're in the middle of anxiety. And I've had to guard myself against that. And so many times I'm so tempted to isolate, but I have to get myself to reach out, to, whether it's to my wife or to my friends, and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with right now, and I can't be alone. I just need somebody with me to talk through me and tell me it's going to be okay. Two, I think being okay with just practical stuff, therapy, breathing exercises, just to like get yourself in a place of being able to process, and getting yourself to a place of, all those things not compounding, but being able to walk through it with a clear mind, and just being okay with the practical stuff and taking care of yourself. And then I think thirdly, most importantly, is having scripture to ground yourself in those moments. I mean, literally just the other day, I was back in that booth having an anxiety attack. And I had to pull up my Bible and find this passage that just to reframe my thoughts and to ground myself, like, okay, these things that I'm feeling aren't true. And even though I feel like they're so true, this is the truth. And just reshaping my mind to what God says about me and what I'm going through.
Man, that's amazing. Can we give it up for Justin sharing your story, man? Wow. I think that's the toughest thing, is to be honest. Because the longer we front, the more we'll pay later. And we can't hide what is happening in our lives from God. And I think the greatest thing is he's not going to be surprised or shocked. He's going to be so proud we came to him. That's the great thing about God, and that's the great thing about what, Justin, what you said, even in that sound booth, that you have his word and it's ready. Like, God's presence, God's spirit, God's word is always ready to handle when moments of loneliness and when moments of self-attack occur. Depression, a constant feeling of sadness or dejection, or a loss of interest, feeling numb. Anxiety, a constant feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease. Like you're always on edge, you're in high alert. And I think about this story, and I'll continue reading, and if you can join me on stage, I'm going to finish with reading, what happened with this guy, Elijah. He's an all-star. Does it just end there? Like, does God send fire and consume him? Like, what's going on? And he's like, hey, you know what, God, I don't want to do this anymore. And in verse 6 of chapter 19, it says, he looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on a hot stone and a jar of water. So he ate and he drank and he laid down again. Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead of you will be too much for you. So he got up and he ate and he drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. There he came to a cave where he had spent the night. But the Lord said to him, Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah replied, I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets. And I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. Go out and stand before me on the mountain, the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And the voice said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I think that my takeaway from this ending of this passage is that it was very interesting. I told you of all the things that Elijah did, right? He calls down fire. He calls rain to come, and it says that a wind brought all the clouds. All of a sudden, a small cloud turned into a big storm, and it rained. And most, if not all, of the elements that were happening when he was in that cave and God spoke to him, all of those elements, it says that they occurred, but God was not in those things. And you know what was very interesting to me is that Elijah was very experienced with fire. He was very experienced with wind. Those things were familiar. God was in those things in chapter 18. God was in those things before. There's a part of Elijah's testimony that those things are a part of what God does, but it says every single one of those things, God was not in them. And it says that once all of those big things ended, it got quiet. And he heard a still small voice, a gentle whisper. And God was in that whisper. This is what I want to tell you students. That we don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't. And the great thing about not knowing is that we serve a God that has already prepared everything new for your tomorrow. How can I prove that? God wasn't in the things that represented his past. They were great. They were awesome. God used fire, amazing. God used wind, awesome. God causes earthquakes, great. He wasn't in any of those things that day, because God will give you what you need today, not what you need yesterday. He's not going to give you an expired blessing. He's not going to give you an expired word. He's going to say, hey, I know that you got it down to a little formula, and you made a formula, and you said, you know what, God talks this way and God does things this way. But I don't know about you, man. The culture is so different right now that I don't need the same God of yesterday. I need the God that says, my mercies are new every morning. And so my mercies for 2021 will look different than my mercies in 2019. But guess what? They're just as powerful to you for saving your life. Because those things were powerful, but God wasn't in them. And so we can pretend like we could do all of the same stuff and get the results that we got before, but God says, I want to do a new thing. And so perhaps you have anxiety that you feel like you can't get peace over. You have depression and you haven't felt joy before because circumstances have taken a turn for the worse. I'm so glad that you're here, because God is not surprised and powerless to what you're feeling. Instead, he has something brand new for you. And even if you came to church last weekend and you came today thinking it was going to be like last weekend, God says, I know what you've seen me do before, but I'm about to do something new. And you want to know what's so profound about a gentle, small whisper and why God could do that to Elijah? Remember, it says Elijah went 40 days and 40 nights walking to this mountain, equivalent to 200 miles. He walked 200 miles. For over a month, he walked 200 miles. He got to this cave in isolation. But you know why God could whisper to him? Because if God could whisper, that means that God was never far away. God whispers to you because he's not far. He doesn't have to yell and scream and say, hey, don't go that way. Hey, stop making that bad decision. He's not in the back of the room yelling at you, stop making mistakes. He's close enough to you no matter what you're going through to whisper to you. And students, in 2021, I'm not asking God to send an earthquake to get my attention, or a wind to get my attention, or fire to get my attention. All I'm asking God is be close to me. I don't want a blessing. I don't want God to be like Santa Claus and drop off a present and then visit me the same time next year. Say, you know what, God, the best present for me is that you're present with me. And for Elijah, it wasn't about the fire. It wasn't about the earthquake. It wasn't about the wind. It wasn't about all the great things that God used him for. It was the fact that he was close, even though he traveled 200 miles to be in a cave by himself. And so students, if you're here today and you're saying, you know what, I have dealt with so much mess in my mind. I've had suicidal thoughts. I haven't stopped being anxious. I'm seeing so many therapists. I'm on so much medication and I'm depressed. Can I tell you that God can give you peace today that surpasses understanding? This is what Philippians chapter 4 says. And if I can I invite everybody to stand? We're ending right here. Then we're going to go to our small groups. Philippians chapter 4. I'm going to give you the word because I believe that it's powerful. And then they're going to sing and we're going to end. It says this, Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. It says, do not be anxious about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all that he has done. Then, everyone say then. Everyone say then. Everyone say then. See, here's the problem. We never get to then because we don't give God our everything before. We don't give him an opportunity. We don't give him the freedom to move in our lives. Even as simple as saying, you know what, I might not have the right words, but God, I'm going to bring you my anxiety. And in an anxious fit, I'm going to come before you. It says, tell God what you need and thank him for all that he has done. And then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. I don't understand what's happening in the world, so I need a peace that I also don't understand. I need a peace that goes beyond what I could think or imagine. And I believe that no matter who you are in this place, no matter what situation you feel like you're in, no matter the hole you feel like you've dug, no matter how distant you feel like you are from God, whatever you see in your life, whatever you feel in your life, God is close enough to whisper to you, to tell you that he's present, that you're not far. So we're going to sing this bridge, and then we're going to pray. But before we do, I want to pray for everybody in this room. Is that all right? I'm going to pray for you, because guess what? On Monday, you got to deal with you. I won't be there. You got to go to sleep tonight. Or try to go to sleep tonight. But what I can guarantee you is, even if you feel by yourself, that doesn't mean that you're actually by yourself. God is with you. God can whisper his word to you, that he has peace that surpasses understanding. Let's pray together, and then we're going to worship, and then we're going to break into our small groups. Heavenly